Thank you everyone for taking time out today to participate in our roundtable titled Cybersecurity Growth in the DC Area, Overcoming Challenges and Doubling Down on Unique Contributors to Business Momentum. My name is Evan Wiesel and I'm one of the hosts of today's event. I'm a principal and co-founder of W2 Communications. I also want to thank our other host, CBRE, and Jonathan Hall and Jack Evans for helping put this discussion together. The discussion is designed to shine a spotlight on the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia, to discuss the opportunities and challenges for cybersecurity companies in this region. We've assembled a panel of experts that will provide their insights into how they have successfully started and led cybersecurity companies in the region. Today's moderator really needs no introduction. Ron Gula, founder of Gula Tech Adventures, has been an amazing role model and continues to provide strategic guidance to numerous cybersecurity companies. He co-founded and then served as CEO and chairman of Tenable Network Security, yet another great national, if not local, success story. And before I turn it over to you, Ron, I want to introduce our panelists today. So first, we've got John Funge, Chief Product Officer at Data Tribe, Michael Denning, partner at Blue Ventures, donnaruginski, the Executive Director for Cybersecurity Initiatives at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, Allison Kidd, co-founder at Grow Cyber, John Czupak, who's the President and CEO at Threat Quotient, and just joining us in the nick of time is Tiffany Kleemann, who is the former CEO of Distill Networks and is now an SVP at Imperva. So thanks again for everyone joining. And Ron, I'm going to turn this over to you.
And thank you for all the panelists being here today. Really a big fan of this region. I'm from upstate New York, and I always felt sort of I was away from the capital and away from New York City. And when I came to Maryland, one of the reasons I wanted to come to Maryland was I was so close to Washington, D.C., so close to Virginia. The sense of closeness was one of the motivators. But the more I worked here, the more I saw a divide. And I think we have so much opportunity to overcome with that divide. So, you know, I'm hoping that we can hear from everybody with these questions. I'm going to try to ask a lot of questions. So if you have one or two comments, hopefully we can get through it a good bit. So let me start with both Johns. So John Czupak, you run Threat Quotient. What are some of the challenges that you have, you know, working in the region?
Boy, that's a loaded question. Should I answer that with a pre-COVID answer or a current situation answer? The current situation is it's like it is for everybody else. But I think we have some unique advantages and maybe some subtle, slight challenges. I wouldn't even go as far as to say it's a disadvantage in this area. And one of the secrets for the folks that aren't local to the DMV is the fact that we have actually a really rich history of cyber in this region. The local folks understand that. Those of us that have gray hair have lived through some of these. And, you know, you can call out generations of billion-dollar businesses. In fact, Tenable is one of them that were built up from the ground up. So I would say first and foremost, one of the strengths is that there is a DNA and a legacy of cyber and cyber startups in this region, some of which are well known and some are sort of hidden secrets. I think what it brings also to the table is what I like to describe as this deep bench of talent, right? And so for those that are fortunate enough to be able to have worked with some of these people, and perhaps work with them in more than one company, we've got the opportunity to bring folks that are battle scarred in to help build these businesses. Now, the one disadvantage, I think, to this area, which would be an interesting debate or perhaps observation from others, is of all of these sort of elements that you'd like to have in place in a cyber company as early as possible, I think of engineering leadership, sales leadership, general management leadership. I think this area does lack in a general category that I'll call product management, product marketing. And there's a bit of this sort of East Coast, West Coast debate we can have. But if I think of one of the most important elements of a company, whether it's startup or even as we grow, this thing called PM that I call product marketing, product management, there are a bit of unicorns in this region. It'd be interesting to see if there are things that we can do either with the educational systems or other types of things to try to raise the talent level in that area. So that's a challenge from my perspective.
Excellent, excellent. John, other comments on that?
Yeah, no, it's and kind of just dovetailing on those comments. So I've been kicking around in this region for a while, and I've seen it kind of ebb and flow from, you know, the 90s and then the trough in the early 2000s and back up. And I've also had the benefit of working in cyber through Data Tribe, but also doing non-government oriented, you know, venture-backed product type companies that are also outside of cyber in the area. And one of the things I think that is really unique about the DC and Maryland broader metro area is, you know, there are really very few people that are, you know, wake up day in, day out to think offensively within the cyber domain. And not that we have a monopoly on it, but we have by far probably the deepest pool of talent of people that do nothing but wake up and think about sort of, you know, by virtue of various intelligence community agencies and such. And so, you know, what we think a lot about at Data Tribe is how to kind of take folks and technology from that very unique kind of pool and then sort of then pivot it to create defensive technologies that then create really great companies that can be sold to commercial enterprises. So kind of, you know, harvesting this deep pool of talent and technology, and that's very unique to this area. It's something that truly I don't think you know, any other places do. And so one of the co-founders of Data Tribe, Mike Janke, he says, you know, this region has the quote unquote has the oil, and it's true. I think we have the oil in the form of that very unique sort of talent base. As a founder, so as an entrepreneur a few times over in the DC area, I would say it depends a lot on the stage of the business. So like in terms of cyber itself, there's roughly in the region about 800 companies that do something with cyber. And then if you reduce it down, there's about 150 that just do cyber. But then there's only about 50 that are actually venture-backed product companies. So like from 800 down to 50, what it says is that there's a huge amount of talent and a huge amount of cyber activity in the region. But to John's point, not a ton of it is actually in product companies that can scale to be the next Tenables. And so I think if you're really early stage, sort of seed stage, angel, you know, sort of even pre-seed, and frankly, Series A, capital sort of availability is one of the key, I think one of the key things that holds back a lot of great things in this region. I think if you're growing further into maybe, you know, kind of a B round, C round, sort of, you know, call it 100 people, 200 people, so on, and you start to look for where are those, you know, product managers, where are those folks that are like chief revenue officers and very experienced marketers that have a commercial product mindset. They are there's less of a deep, sort of a deep well of that talent here. And so I think early stages, it's very much access to know-how and capital. And then as I think as the companies grow, it starts to become access to talent that has a kind of product mindset, not just product management, but also through other kind of functional areas in, you know, in the company.
So it's no secret to our audience that we've shared some questions ahead of time, but before we go on to the next question, anybody else want to weigh in on this? Anybody have a strong thought?
Well, I would agree with both Johns. I mean, our company was actually founded as a way to help these startup technologies, people that are pre-seed and or are looking to get financing, to help them with identifying a pipeline and help them with go-to-market strategy and help them kind of position their product in the market. And there really is a lack of that in the area, which is why we founded Grow Cyber. Both of us have, you know, over 25 years of experience in the industry. And so as we kind of went through and we've run our own businesses and we've had success through that, we just found that there was a real lack of that and a need for it, which is the impetus for bringing Grow Cyber to the table. But one of the things specific to the COVID and what we're dealing with right now is we're finding that these small companies are really fighting for financing with PPP loans. And so it becomes even more difficult to establish that funding in the environment that we're dealing with today. a couple of our customers have actually found us, and the reason that we're engaged with them is because they're looking for somebody to help them with their pipeline in terms of, we're sitting here right now, our pipeline's been delayed 60, 90, 120 days. We need somebody to help us push that logjam through. And so they've engaged with us to try and help kind of figure out strategies and ways to move the pipeline along and grow their business in times like, we're dealing with COVID. So those are some of the challenges that we're seeing. We actually had one customer who we're trying to push through, and we're trying to help them establish a relationship with a key, I can't say who, but one of the key larger companies in the area. And they got back to us and they said, just for procurement purposes, it's 10 to 15 weeks just to give you an MSA. I mean, that's pretty insane in terms of the timing and the backlog of what's transpiring in the procurement world in terms of some of these startup organizations and getting going.
Excellent, excellent. So Michael and Tiffany, Michael as an investor in cyber companies, and Tiffany as a startup and now part of a larger company, can you guys talk for a bit? How does this region help you compete either internationally or within the United States? Tiffany, let's hear from you.
Well, I think as both Johns, I think, just talked about, I mean, I think while there are some inhibitors with being on the East Coast, there are also some benefits. I have been at companies for the last 2 decades that are almost entirely not headquartered here traditionally. But because there was a need for expertise and leadership on the East Coast, it gave me a leg up. And those companies were gracious enough to allow me to work from the East Coast, whether that was Symantec or iSight Partners, where I was chief revenue officer of a company headquartered out of Dallas. But more recently, I also had the benefit of a fantastic board who allowed me to move headquarters to this area when I became CEO of Distill. And so, I think part of this is, what kind of support network do you have from your board of directors, right, in order to, allow the company to grow and scale in a way that you think it needs to, and gain access to talent where, one of the upsides of being here is there is a ton of fantastic talent, especially when it comes to certain functions. By the way, I completely agree that we are limited by expertise in product management, chief marketing officers, really hard to find around here, especially depending on the size and scale of the business. And leadership in kind of the overall go-to-market. So Allison, great job on identifying that as a gap, because I think it is definitely one that exists. But as John F knows, because we just had this conversation about a week ago, I just left Imperva actually on Friday. I finished my contract with the company following the acquisition, and I am actively exploring opportunities again. So it's an interesting time for me as I'm again looking at other CEO, president, and COO types of opportunities right now. I'm exploring the gamut of, one, the weirdness of doing interviews virtually entirely, right? Before I land my next thing, which is so strange. But also, I think there's, again, benefit to being in this region of the country, especially even as I've looked at international opportunities in Europe. The East Coast becomes a much better location for executives if they're looking to establish a CEO of a subsidiary, for example, or a president and GM of the Americas region, et cetera. Much more easy to engage with a headquarters-based company in Israel or in the UK, et cetera, if you're on the East Coast than if you're on the West, just from a geographic time zone perspective. So I'll stop there and see what my—
Congratulations on being free.
Oh, thank God. Thank you.
Michael?
So I'll answer so your question about kind of the advantages of the East Coast. I'll say a couple things. This region in particular, offers talent access, in particular technical talent. You have a lot of technical talent that has a ability to kind of and knows what it's like to work at defending large-scale networks. So not just you have a really large hub of networking skill set in this area. I think the other thing too is, notwithstanding the current social distancing requirements aside, a lot of company headquarters are on the East Coast, and the density of those headquarters are all within a reasonable a car drive around and relatively inexpensive travel to get to them. So the ability to close and get to customers in relatively short order is a big advantage of being on the East Coast and this area. You're very close train ride to New York City, Boston, Philadelphia. To be able to access those customers is another key advantage. But I think really the biggest advantage, especially for early stage companies, is really the access to essentially anywhere from 21 to 25% of the total IT budget spend, and even higher when you consider kind of the bleeding edge of security spend is in federal U.S. public sector. And a lot of them are willing to do paid proof of concepts and paid trials. So I do think that there is a big advantage with the 3-letter agencies all being centrally located in this area. Their willingness to do paid trials, paid proof of concepts, and have various programs that proof of efficacy. You can get into various programs in this area and really fund some early days from those 3-letter agencies to DARPA to Incutel, et cetera. I think it really provides a good kind of early stage proof of value for your offering in kind of the true battleground.
Excellent. Thank you. Donna, what are the universities doing? In your case, University of Maryland, what are we doing to help create the next generation of cyber warriors, computer programmers, the oil, as John mentioned earlier?
I think that starting a business in this area, it really is a great opportunity because of the quality of the university systems throughout Maryland, DC, and Virginia. We have top-notch education systems. Coming from the Maryland system side, and specifically the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, the programs we have in cybersecurity are really quite advanced. We offer degree programs from Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, undergraduate certificates in cyber analytics, and ability to jumpstart into graduate programs, your traditional types of masters of programs that are research-based and technical-based, but then also that applied area of masters in cybersecurity for practitioners. And this is very important for companies to be able to offer operational personnel, graduate courses and degrees, policy, strategy, digital forensics. In Maryland, at UMBC, we've taken it one step further by offering through UMBC training centers core curriculum for non-degree seeking people. This could be people wanting to change degrees or people who are looking to get into a new opportunity in cyber. And through a 10-month, 15-month, 2-year process of training, they can get the credentials to go in and work in companies in the field of cybersecurity with certificates for computer science in various areas. So this is a real strong advantage, I think, that the region offers. Many of our universities also have research parks associated with them. And I think this is a real opportunity for young startup companies to be exposed to an incubator environment. At BW Tech, at the research park, we offer resources from the university to those startup companies in the park. Access to the research being done through faculty, students to take on internship programs, and that connection with mentors, residential mentors to help those companies get started, find funding, work through the economic opportunities in the state. Throughout the DMV, we have incubators and we have accelerator programs that are fantastic to help young companies get started. So I think these are some of the key things. It's really important for business to take advantage of what's coming out of the university systems and to make the engagement with the career centers at each university so that the students know about your companies, that they can learn about them, that attend job fairs, have intern opportunities to really create that connection with companies. And it really can jumpstart not only the individuals in their careers, but give really good, fine talent to be developed within companies. So I think this is an incredible area to seek talent from the university systems.
Excellent. So for people who are watching this, this is May of 2020. Michael, you had a question or comment?
Yeah. So I got 4 college kids in my house as of right now. I got 1 that's not in my house. So here's what I'll say. I think, one of the 4 is an engineer. And sadly, or maybe not, 2 are poli-sci. And the good news is one of the poli-sci ones is graduating this year. Good news is he's getting a job in sales and cybersecurity, and he's perfect fit for it. I won't say the name of the company. Great company, name brand company. But I will say one of the things that I think I will say in thinking about what the universities can do better is that the kids now, I have two of the 5 that I reference. They're not all mine. Some are friends, et cetera, that kind of got stuck when spring break came around. They going into 4 years ago, when they were deciding on majors, they didn't understand the ramifications of their decisions. And I would say the universities are very kind of, hey, every major is the same. Every major is a good major. Every major leads to an equal, it's just kumbaya. And I think and maybe that's on the parents to educate the kids to say, but not every major is an equal opportunity for employment at the end of the day. And I think there could be a little bit better job of saying, look, certain jobs are going to lead to more school and more debt, and certain majors are going to lead to tangible skills that lead to jobs immediately after, and some are highly required in the economy right now today. And the work that you're doing at UMBC is needed right now today, And so I think that's one of the things that now these kids did not realize they were going to come headfirst into what they're coming into, but I think it's an important factor to say these are highly in demand, and having before I was doing kind of venture investing in the last 3 years, we were recruiting out of kind of local universities, and we would go headlong against Microsoft and Google, and it's like we looked up at the salaries that they were offering and we're like, how are we going to compete about that? And we would establish a relationship and try to recruit them early and recruit it on environment and local and things like that. But at the end of the day, they're often $20,000, $30,000 higher salaries. It's really hard to compete. And so what I would say is there's also just a really almost insatiable appetite for the need for more cybersecurity talent at the kind of the bottom end coming out of the universities as well, and helping the kids understand this is really an in-demand field right now that we could use more and more. And it's not, you don't have to be, you don't need an 800 on your SAT maths. It just takes a curious mind that's willing to kind of dig in and solve problems. So that would be my take on on that, having kind of recent experience with some college graduating seniors and all the way down to freshmen.
All right, for our next topic, we're going to talk about what the government can do to help foster cyber, and specifically cyber companies. Now, we just had the PPP loan bailouts. We had a huge number of cyber companies apply to, get a couple months of employment, which is an excellent example of the government helping out. But there's all sorts of things, like in Anne Arundel County in Maryland, if you want to get somebody trained in a cyber certification, you can actually apply for basically a refund. And people are using this to get training at SANS, at CBRE, and whatnot. So I just want to go around the horn and get one concise example of something that you've done in your career or one of your portfolio companies that's taken advantage of something. It could be anything. Donna, when we get to the UMBC, talk about specifically. Well, let's let Donna go first. Yeah.
There's a lot of opportunity out there right now. As the university, we're focusing on a particular sector where workforce development in cyber skills is really critical, and there are monies that are being put into grant opportunities right now related to the current crises to address readiness in manufacturing. And I've had established partnerships with a number of companies, and we're seeking those grant opportunities, which will provide training to manufacturing workers, staff, to bring them up to speed on cyber, so that those capabilities can be incorporated into that sector. It's really critical because we're trying to improve the competitiveness of U.S. manufacturing. And with that comes training that workforce in the new digital technologies it will foster improved competitiveness and the cyber aspects of those. So there are, as you said, opportunities for grants and training and education. And some of those are sponsored directly by states or associations, and a lot of it's coming from the federal government.
Allison, do you guys or any of the companies you work with take advantage of things in Virginia or Maryland or DC?
Yeah, in fact, Fairfax County right now has a disaster relief fund for small businesses on top of PPP and EIDL that they can apply for, where they can get an additional 20 grand in funding to help them, along the path of building out their businesses. In addition to that, any of the small businesses that we're working with, and I know some of them have applied for this, that can hire people that are going to earn less than $75K a year. And that's people coming out of college. It's interns. It's the people that we want to build into cyber hunters and cyber experts and product managers. They're specifically giving grants for that to companies that are doing that in the state of Virginia. So I think that's been one of the really great things that the government's put forward in terms of things that are coming out of the situation today.
John from Data Tribe, any comments?
Yeah, it's interesting. In at a very high level, I sort of think, particularly because of the COVID just disruption, a lot of the kind of, sort of calculus has just been scrambled, and there's a lot of uncertainty and things that will kind of sort out. I do think at a certain macro level, just the entire region is kind of sort of has a little bit more of a stabilizing factor because of the large federal government presence here. In terms of, if I look at our portfolio companies, definitely, so to kind of dovetail on Michael's point from before, a few of them definitely have substantial contracts with the federal government, and that does provide a stable set of customers and revenue. However, we are very very focused on sort of having the right balance of that. We don't we think that the government customers can be a powerful asset, but too much of it, we've found, ends up causing the company to kind of take on it looks more like a government servicing company and less like a commercial product company. And in next rounds of financing, the valuation of that, that's sort of ascribed to those revenue streams can be somewhat discounted. A number of our companies have been, just in the short term, taking advantage of the PPP program. We look to, we're pretty active in the community. I mean, we're continuously looking to collaborate, with the states to kind of sort of think about how to make the area more attractive. I mean, I think one of the things that, at a state level, there really could be and should be a little bit more attention paid to how to incentivize more capital to come to the region, incentive capital. In fact, like right now, there's some proposed bills that will actually go in exactly the opposite direction in Maryland, that would impose new taxes potentially on investment management, and it's a type of thinking. I think that there's a line of thinking where maybe that could make sense, but in terms of like building up the economy and building up job creating product companies that can really scale, it's pretty counterproductive. And so, I think kind of thinking through ways to sort of attract more capital to the region is a kind of theme that I would propose would be an area that would be a good thing to work on. But for sure, our companies have been benefiting in a variety of different ways from working with the government.
Yeah, Tiffany, did you get any benefits along the way from? Were you in DC or Virginia? I forget.
Northern Virginia.
Northern Virginia. Yeah. So did the Virginia help you out at all?
Yeah, I think there was some help initially, and even prior to me coming on board, as Distill looked to create an Arlington office prior to us even creating headquarters here. There were some tax incentives and whatnot with Virginia and also Arlington more specifically. So I think it's looking at both. It's looking at federal, it's looking at state, it's looking at county and or city incentives. I couldn't agree more with John on that. One thing that I would say though is I think there are a couple of things that the government can still do a better job of. And one of those is in affecting the proper procurement changes, honestly, to be a little bit more agile in order to accommodate the more swift procurement of kind of the latest cybersecurity technology, right? Because it's always been difficult for the government to get the latest and greatest capability. It's always been a laggard, largely not because of their interest or lack thereof, but because of the procurement cycles around that and how they procure technology. So I do think fundamentally, that's an area ripe for kind of disruption and change, more specifically. And then the only other thing I'd say is, as it pertains to, and this dates me back almost 2 decades actually to when we developed the first cybersecurity strategy when I worked for Dick Clark at the White House. And I was responsible for authoring the components of the strategy related to K through 12 higher education and certifications and training, and worked with a lot of folks in the industry to shape that piece. I think there is still more work that could be done there. And I'll give you an example more recently of some changes that I'm seeing in a positive direction. My alma mater, Coast Guard, has done a much better job in the last couple of years to actually move further along in the establishment of a true workforce focused on cybersecurity expertise with an actual cyber command component now within the Coast Guard, expertise, workforce development work. The Academy now is building a track more specifically in this area versus it was just a traditional engineering track. By the way, maybe there were a couple of classes pertaining to cyber. So I think in that regard, more around kind of workforce development, real career tracks in the Coast Guard and some other services where maybe that had not been a focus previously. And then lastly, the procurement changes.
Got it. So Michael and then John. So Michael, as an investor sitting on a number of companies, both in Maryland and Virginia, any specific examples of local government, county government, federal government helping them out?
I think the couple things that I've seen government do well, and it's had a little bit of its ups and downs, but some of the incubator programs have been helpful. Mach 37 comes to mind. It ebbs and flows a little bit. It's kind of making a little bit of a comeback in Fairfax County there. So helping, it's a small amount of money, but more around, hey, this is a business plan, this is good financials, it's coming, it's a real, they do cohorts, they help with kind of knowledge, they bring good technologists in, and they come out with a lot more know-how of how to build a real business around that technology idea. Some tax breaks, also kind of setting aside some of that shared space and some of that low-cost shared space that I've seen. I've seen that in Howard County has done that as well. And so those are some good examples, because what it does is, brings those like-minded, early revenue, pre-revenue companies together. They can share some of those ideas, like those type of programs that help bring, really early days, seed level, A round, even pre-A round type companies together. And that energy and that shared ideas is what keeps a lot of those companies alive in those early days. And I think those are a couple things that the government can do that, frankly, is not a ton of investment, but can lead to some really good outcomes.
Excellent. And John Czupak, I mean, you're part of another great success story in the area, SourceFire, which obviously exited to Cisco, and now you're running Threat Quotient. And I think you have offices in, is it 3 states? So what have you seen?
We're counting countries now, but yeah, our major offices actually are shared and split between our headquarters in Reston, Virginia, Northern Virginia, and a little town called Mount Airy, Maryland, kind of between, for those that aren't familiar with the area, between Frederick and Columbia, Baltimore, sort of. And you might ask yourself why. And the simple answer is my head of engineering lives in Mount Airy, so in the summertime he walks to the office. But there actually is a little bit more calculation in the way that we set up our facilities over there. And it's pretty simple. A lot of talent within the region, reverse commute for people. And we rolled the dice a little bit with setting engineering up in Maryland and not being at headquarters, but you know what? It worked out perfectly. So we've got a bit of rivalry, which is built into the culture of the company. When Reston is, the center of the universe and headquarters, and Maryland decided that to give themselves their own name. So technically they're the Maryland Center of Excellence. So, there's a little bit of esprit de corps that comes in there, but back to your original question around help from the, agencies and entities and locals and federal, we got a lot of help along the way. And I'll give some very practical examples for those that are at the early stage. One of our earliest investors, seed slash angel, was CIT Gap Funds, funded by the state of Virginia. They don't do cyber per se, but they have certainly cyber companies in the portfolio. That led to connective tissue to organizations like Blue Ventures, covered by Mike in the middle. That led to more connective tissue into a little known group in the Northern Virginia area called the Virginia Tech Investor Community. And that was really a bunch of privates that put money together with the purpose of funding, alumni out of Virginia Tech. Now, I'm a Terp, go Terps, Donna, but I'm happy to support Virginia Tech. But if you think about that, that was all early stage stuff, funding, networking, connections. And I think about folks like CIT in the early days of our company. That led to finding space for us in those days. We were at the Fishbowl at AOL. So, we heard mention of getting access to shared facilities. I actually look, fondly at the days where I would steal, conference rooms out of AOL until they kicked us out and made us get our own office. But there is a lot of that out there and available if you've got the abilities to get access or know how to get at it. I'll give you a little small hint too for those that want perhaps access to some support out of Northern Virginia. There's a group called the Virginia Economic Development Partnerships, VEDP. Some may or may not have participated. It's not big money, but you know what? It's free money. It found me, it found us, and the proposition is pretty simple. They're looking to promote Virginia companies, tech companies. They have, at least historically, have had access to funding to be able to support things like providing funding for doing international events. And so when I was at the seed stage, or even the early angel / pre-Series A stage, getting 10 or 20 grand out of VEDP, wow, made a big difference. So go visit Ellen Minard if she's still over there. Tell her I sent you, and maybe she's got programs that people can get access to. Now, I want to segue into maybe a slightly different tangent here, because there was some conversation around investment. I think this region is doing an unbelievably remarkable job with the early stage cyber opportunity. We've got folks here on the panel and others that are not on the panel that get it, see it, get it, and are behind it. Gula Tech Ventures, Blue we mentioned, Data Tribe, and there are others. So there's a really healthy early stage thing going on. I think that bleeds into that Series A for those companies that can prove they've got something and can get it off the ground. Where I see a gap, and we're now as a business into that next phase, into that early growth stage, growth area. And I look at this region and I think about the really big potential for cyber businesses to break out and be big international businesses like we've seen historically. Some of these companies break out. There is definitely a gap of funding entities that really focus on that either early growth stage or into growth stage with a real domain expertise on cyber. And so people like me, where do I go for that next round? I fly to the West Coast where I used to pre-COVID, or I take trips up to New York or Boston. I can have good friendly conversations. People know us, reputation gets out. But if you don't have that cyber DNA in you, it is more difficult for firms and the partnership actually to wrap their head around a lot of the things that we do, right? So I don't know what the action is. There is an opportunity, I think, for a growth player to come into this region and really clean house.
Oh, for sure.
There's great deals out there.
Anybody have any strong comment on that, John? That's a great comment.
Frankly, Ron, I'd like to hear your story on that. You know, you probably could be an authority to comment. I know you're the kind of moderator, but you'd probably be the best authority to comment.
So, you know, so I look at people like Huntress Labs. So Huntress Labs just raised from ForgePoint, which is a traditional, you know, even though they're nationwide, worldwide, you know, West Coast type of company, and it's a good company. And once you get to a certain point, it doesn't really matter where you're from, but you can't ever forget kind of where you came from. The thing is, if you had talked to Huntress prior to the 2 years before that, it's exactly what John's talking about, right? You're kind of wandering, looking for the person who recognizes your value. And it's not that these people aren't here. You have to realize that these big venture capital funds, they're in the DC area, they're in the Maryland area, the Virginia area, they're there at the CIT Mach 37 events. Companies need to get to that level, and you really need that investor who can write, you know, that $3 million, $5 million, $10 million check before you can get going. I'm a little concerned that right now with COVID, you know, our region is going to take a step back. And even though I'm kind of harping on starting companies, I'm really concerned that that certain class of investor is just not going to be here. So I guess I can ask a question since I'm the moderator now.
Well, yeah, I mean, Ron, I would echo that. I mean, we found, so in the way that we kind of do things with our portfolio companies, I mean, kind of the whole, and we created this thing called kind of an engagement plan where we work over the entire seed kind of journey with them very closely. But the whole, like the big milestone at the end of it is getting a really, really high quality Series A round. And, you know, we pulled it off with Dragos, we've pulled it off with Prevalian, we've pulled it off with Invail. Attila has done a nice A round. So like we've gotten these companies, but the A round, if you look at the metrics, is it is the hardest one. B rounds are slightly easier, and John, you're quite right. At the very early stage, pre-seed and angel seed, that's available to entrepreneurs, and so what we end up doing as and honestly, from a founder's perspective, I kind of am almost a little envious of the founders that work with us. We start really early and start to use all the contacts we have, and a lot of those contacts, unfortunately, are outside the region, and a lot of them are on the West Coast, to really sort of kind of wire and to sort of create those relationships, those investment grade kind of relationships between the founders and partners at firms that understand cyber super early in the process, because there are very, to Ron's point, very specific kind of milestones the companies need to achieve in order to really be ready for that round. And there is a dearth, like there's a gap of like, there are funds, to your point, Ron, in this area that do those stages, but there's not a huge depth of them. It does really compel the entrepreneurs to have to go outside the area for it.
All right, so last question. A lot of this is about the ecosystem here in the DC region. So you're at Cyber Conference, an entrepreneurial conference. Up walks a shiny, brand new, young, wants to be an entrepreneur startup, and they ask you, I want to start a cybersecurity company. What type of company do you tell them to start? Government services, product company, SaaS, whatever comes to your mind. Let's just kind of go with that. And I'll put, I'll go with put Tiffany on the spot first.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
The areas, and I'm even doing some diligence work around some of this with some firms, et cetera. I mean, what's hot right now continues to be more around next generation MSSPs, with the shortage of workforce and lack of expertise, and the fact that everything is moving cloud and as a service, and the lack of perimeter. I mean, that is just continuing to be a hot space. And then any products, obviously, that can support that, whether, the latest MDR capabilities, identity as a service, I think is a huge opportunity, in my opinion. But things that can be brought together to be more comprehensive as a platform play, with the inclusion of orchestration and workflow and automation. As an example, I was at Distill, bot mitigation company, but the trending and the reason why we ultimately made the choice to partner with Imperva was because we, in talking to the analyst community and talking to customers, reading the tea leaves, it became more a story of application security more broadly, not niche point products, right, within that space, but pulling together a platform story. So it's just one example, but where there continues to be a trending in that direction, especially as you talk to CISOs today, and I talk to a number of them often. I mean, they're feeling a lot of point product saturation, just feeling overwhelmed, and the number of products they have to manage on a regular basis. So where we can help them by bringing kind of those point products together into stacks or platforms,
as a MSSP SaaS.
Yeah, or as a service. Yeah. And cloud-based capability, I think, is going to be the name of the game.
Got it. Donna, first time CEO entrepreneur. What do you think's a good advice for that person?
Well, I would back up what Tiffany just said. I think it's a really good area, particularly starting a company like that in our region, and it can start out even as a service company. That at least enables you to get the baseline of talent that you would need to migrate into a managed security service provider, and establish contracts with commercial companies, or even subcontracting under federal type contracts. Gives you a good base of not only expertise, references, to be able to move into that managed security area. And absolutely right, there are so many tools that are technologies needed today to defend the network, and bringing that together through a managed security offering where specializing in expertise is of great value. I see it being a business for the future as well.
Excellent. Allison, do you agree that starting a MSSP or a technology accelerated services offering is a good advice for a first time?
Yeah, I would agree with that, because I mean, and that's basically where I've come from for the last 20 years is the MSSP space. So it's near and dear to my heart. But I would agree with Tiffany and with Donna. There's a lot of technologies out there today, and what they struggle with is the expertise in the customer environment to be able to deploy those and maintain them on an ongoing basis. So we've got partners who have these great technologies, and we take it out to the customers and we say, hey, look at this. This could be an amazing technology for you and save you a lot of money. They say, we just don't have the people, the personnel, the talent to be able to do that today. We're struggling just to keep our head above water with what we've already got. So we actually have got in our portfolio MDR clients that we will take these technologies to and say, listen, this is something that if you integrated it into what you're doing today, nobody else is doing it. And we can combine and gel these companies together to basically grow both. And at some point in time, potentially there's a value to bringing them together and merging those organizations. But, I think I would agree that the services play, and in particular SaaS and MDR are really huge, and their growth opportunities in the cyberspace today.
Excellent. John Czupak, first of all, I want to recognize that you are not only a leader in the space, but you're also putting your money on the balance line. I see your name on plenty of term sheets as prior seed funds, so that's great. So besides telling people not to do another threat intelligence platform, what kind of companies would you to want to start?
Yeah, I may give a similar answer, but I'm gonna approach the answer from a different perspective. The first thing I would advise is know who you are and what you want to be. Are you a product company? Are you a service company? Are you a managed service company? Are you a government contractor? Are you selling to the enterprise? What are you, and why are you deciding to be that, right? We are an enterprise product platform company. That's what we are, right? That's our DNA. That doesn't mean I won't do some services, but that's the mission that we've chosen to pursue. I think the second thing I would strongly encourage is understand not only the competitive dynamic of this space as it exists today, but 3 years from today, but also what is that addressable market? There's a lot of really cool stuff out there that has some value, but if it's really hard and the market's small, good luck. You could be the best at it, but at best you'll have an average outcome, and it'll be really, really hard. So understand that you've got a big market to go after. Know what you want, what you are, what you want to be. Know that you've got a big market. I think that I'll say something that's not controversial, but the world is going to be different when we come out of this. I don't think I can make I don't think I'm going to make the claim that everything's cloud. And I think there'll be a world of hybrid cloud with everything moving that direction. So to simply just hang your hat on cloud is everything, I'm not sure that's the answer, but I do believe, and we're already seeing it, that those companies that understand how users interact with you, how they want to engage and learn, and especially how they want to trial technology is going to be different. The days of walking in, dropping a box, walking out, checking in, those days are long gone. So you'd better be thinking about, if you're a product or a managed service or service company, that the experience and the ease of implementation and the ease of turning these things on, you better get that really, really right, because if you don't, you'll lose. So anyhow, I'm rambling on a bunch of topics, but kind of my view of the world.
It's good stuff. So John, Michael, I want to change up the question a little bit. As the full-time professional venture capitalists, keeping it positive, what kind of things are you saying no to? And then what kind of advice are you giving them to kind of rectify maybe lack of product market fit, or just probably getting over their skis as a first-time entrepreneur?
So the things we're saying no to are, managed security services are fine. I would say we've seen a lot recently. It's something a little bit, maybe John, to piggyback off something John said earlier, and maybe, know what you're going to be, right? And so if you start off as a services company, it's kind of unlikely you're going to get money from us. Mostly because you're kind of going to get addicted to that services revenue, and that's fine, but it's unlikely you're going to get venture money because you're going to go down a path, and it's very hard to build a product out of a services company unless you start with a product and services or professional services becomes a thing that supports the implementation of that product. So just go with your eyes wide open. If you really want to go the kind of the hyper-growth venture route, you really have to start with a product idea. And that to me starts with an idea of a SaaS-based product and a targeted market, a large addressable market that you're going after. So the type of companies that we are investing in have a large addressable market, a very repeatable sales process. So the type of companies that we are investing in, and we've had seen some success, and you actually brought up one that we invested in early, and I know you were an early investor as well, is Huntress, right? And the interesting thing that they did is they leveraged a go-to-market strategy, which was they leveraged MSPs. So think about your go-to-market, and they said MSPs is going to be our differentiated go-to-market. They went down market. They aggressively targeted the MSP buyer in a relatively white space, unaddressed white space for the MDR solution, and they took off like a rocket ship from a sales perspective. And they had a very easy to implement, very easy to sell, very differentiated solution. So I think that's something that you really want to focus on from a product perspective, and you really want to kind of drive that wedge and really aggressively go after. So when you're thinking about your product, make sure you understand what your market is. Make sure you understand whether you're a services company or a product company, and make sure your route to market, not just your technical widget, so to speak. And so take some of the advice that maybe some of the other speakers said there, apply that, and go in eyes wide open.
John, last word.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to probably echo a number of the themes that have already been said. I've, over the course of my kind of business adventures, have had the very good fortune of having started and built a professional service consulting company, decent size, sold it to a public company. And then I've also built two others that I raised money and built products. So I've kind of done both from a founder's perspective. And I use the term, one of them is basketball. Another one's baseball. They're just games. They're very different games. And when we talk with entrepreneurs, it's oftentimes first-time founders, they're really not, they don't have a frame of reference to just understand how different baseball is from basketball. And it's not that one's inherently better than the other. And if you look at the DC area and Baltimore area, there are so many really, really successful entrepreneurs that have, they own like 70% of a company. They've bootstrapped it. They've never raised any capital. They've built it up to 300 or 400 people, and they might sell it and they walk away extremely, like that's an incredibly great path to take. It's very different than the quote unquote Bay Area offense, where you're raising money round to round and going after $1 billion+ product opportunity. They're just two different, things. And to John and Michael's points, it's really important, I think, that the founders like have a sense of what baseball is and have a sense of what, what basketball is. And when we're talking with them, we try to kind of clarify that if there is confusion. We look really hard at, so some of the things that we spend a lot of time thinking about when we're looking at different companies is, time to value for the customer. So you guys know this better than I do. It's CISOs have such an incredibly stacked day. They have no bandwidth to try out new products. They maybe every year will have opportunity to do just a small handful of proofs of concept. So if you have to deploy something on an agent on endpoints or things like that, that starts to get, in the way of sort of time to value. And so, for instance, some of our companies like a Strider or a Prevalion are very much SaaS platforms where you just log in and run a query and immediately get value. And so we look very closely at things like time to value. We also, again, we do play the Bay Area offense full on. So we are looking for huge opportunities, truly, you know, kind of over the horizon technologies, things that will kind of change the game, change the category. And, you know, so we're oftentimes looking at, you know, we're saying to ourselves, okay, well, if we make this investment in 18 months, how will Kleiner Perkins or Andreessen Horowitz look at it? And for better or worse, but that's kind of the way in some of the you know, the kind of mental gymnastics we're going through. And for sure, you know, again, a consulting company is in a professional services business. It's funny because like the Bay Area in some ways, we are kind of the Silicon Valley of contracting. I mean, they're called Beltway Bandits for nothing. And a lot of times the savvy in creating a professional services business, you know, we take it for granted in this area. Folks on the West Coast, it's like foreign to them. They don't have any idea how to do it. You know, and kind of vice versa, where we have more of a dearth of product management out this way. But, you know, those are some of the things I think, you know, kind of echoing some of the points. And it's really, really important that those founders kind of understand what game they're playing and be true to themselves in terms of their goals and what they want to do.
Excellent, excellent. I love the answer of starting a services company. It might not be an IPO-able thing or something that Cisco is going to acquire for billions of dollars, but it's the kind of thing we need in the ecosystem. I think founders get the muscle memory of hiring people, retaining a staff, serving a customer, and then really understanding that problem space so that maybe they do go do a product company down the road if that's in their DNA. So great answers. I thank everybody for participating in this, taking time out of your COVID schedules. I know it's one GoToMeeting, Zoom, Citrix Hangout after another. Also want to thank Jonathan Hall from CBRE and Evan from W2 Communications, the whole Cyber Tacos team and good stuff. And best of luck to Tiffany, who's currently unemployed during the worst economic. No, I think you're going to be fine and do great things next. So Evan, any final words?
Yeah, no, really. Thanks, Ron. Thanks everybody for joining the panel today. Certainly appreciate what you all have done for this region, and you know, good luck here as we move forward through this kind of uncertainty right now that we're all going through. But again, thanks for doing what you do in this particular region, which I'm so very passionate about. So thank you all.